Imagine inheriting an empire of millions and immediately inheriting the responsibility of ordering your own brother's deaths. That's exactly what 16th century Ottoman princes faced whenever they heard their coronation sermon echo in the mosque's dome. They didn't rely on dice or duels, they relied on fratricide, a state-sanctioned murder, to prevent the horrific 8-year civil war that followed Sultan Bayezid I's death in 1402. It sounds more like Game of Thrones than a sophisticated empire, but the Ottomans argued it was the lesser evil. If you can't believe this was once legal, smash that like button and subscribe. You're about to learn the real story behind the headlines. Before Mehmed II, the Conqueror, took Constantinople in 1453, brothers battled one another for the throne in a brutal game of thrones that often saw dozens of princes slaughtered or imprisoned. Determined to spare his empire further fragmentation, Mehmed II issued a firman, imperial decree, in 1451 legalizing fratricide under the maxim, "Of any of my sons that ascends the throne, it is acceptable for him to kill his brothers for the common benefit of the people." Religious scholars, Ulema, largely approved, citing precedents in earlier Islamic polities and arguing that preventing chaos outweighed the sin of kinslaying. This chilling decree became the Kardesh Katli brother slaughter policy, ostensibly an act of mercy to prevent full-blown civil wars. The Janissaries began as the Sultan's personal slave soldiers, recruited via the Devshirme levy of Christian youths, converted to Islam, and trained as elite infantry. Known for their loyalty, discipline, and distinctive hats, they form the backbone of Ottoman military might. Over time, they amassed political influence, sometimes kingmakers, sometimes kingbreakers. When a new sultan ordered fratricide, it was often the Janissaries who provided the muscle. As palace guards and armbearers, they were summoned to the Topkapi Palace's inner wards, where they strangled princes with the peshtimal silk cord without spilling royal blood, a method considered more dignified than the sword. Sometimes the brothers were beheaded, but strangulation by bowstring remained the norm. If you're amazed by these dual roles, elite soldiers and royal executioners, hit subscribe now so you don't miss our deep dive into their most notorious revolt next week. After Bayezid I's defeat by Timur in 1402, the subsequent interregnum saw 4 princes fracture the empire, devastating Anatolia and the Balkans in an 8-year war. Mehmed II's fratricide decree aimed to make succession swift and uncontested, thus preserving the state's integrity. As the old proverb goes, better a swift knife than a slow bleed. By removing rival claimants, new sultans solidified their authority. This sent a clear message: no palace intrigue, only one ruler. Janissaries, loyal to the institution rather than any one prince, ensured this policy's enforcement. Drop a comment if you think this policy actually saved the empire or doomed its soul. Grand Mufti fatwas declared fratricide permissible in the interest of Nizam-i Alem, worldly order. Scholars referenced Quranic verses about eliminating discord and hadiths favoring state unity. Thus, the killing of brothers was reframed not as murder but as maslaha, public interest. Legal manuals argued that the death of a few princes was superior to the death of thousands of soldiers and civilians in succession wars. This calculus, though brutal, reflected a pragmatic jurisprudence rarely seen in medieval Europe. In October 1595, Mehmed III ascended the throne and, in one of history's most shocking bloodlettings, ordered the execution of 19 of his brothers. Strangled in the palace courtyard by executioners legally permitted to ignore kinship ties. Some accounts describe the gruesome scene, silence broken only by muffled sobs and the rustle of silk cords. This massacre, though appalling, was defended as the ultimate demonstration of loyalty to the state over family. If Mehmed's actions left you speechless, hit like and brace yourself for more jaw-droppers. By the early 17th century, public sentiment turned against fratricide. The Ulema and the populace decried the barbarity, leading Mehmed I, R 1603 to 1617, to abandon the practice after unexpectedly ascending the throne and sparing his brothers. Instead, he instituted the kafes, cage, lifelong confinement of princes in gilded cells within the harem. Janissaries, ever the political force, rebelled when their expectations of patronage or pay were thwarted, most notably overthrowing Osman II in 1622 after he attempted reforms infringing on their privileges. Though not directly about fratricide, these revolts underscored their power as both protectors and subverters of sultanic authority. By the mid-19th century, the Ottomans had largely moved to bureaucratic succession and imprisonment, rendering fratricide obsolete. The auspicious incident of 1826 saw Sultan Mehmed II forcibly disband the Janissaries, executing or exiling thousands, effectively ending their capacity to enforce dynastic murders. The shift from fratricide to seniority-based succession and institutional reforms reflected the empire's transition from patrimonial rule to modern statehood. The Ottoman fratricide policy and the Janissary's role offer stark lessons on the dangers of unchecked military power and pragmatic morality. While the policy arguably prevented repeated civil wars, it also illuminated how a state can sanction brutality in the name of order. As the saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and nowhere is that more vivid than in the bloodied pages of the imperial logbooks. If this tale of power and family betrayal shook you, remember to subscribe. We've got more imperial intrigue on the way. So why did the Janissaries commit fratricide? They were the state's enforcers, the blade and cord in the hands of newly crowned sultans, a final check against the chaos of dynastic wars. Under the law crafted by Mehmed II, fratricide became a grim tradition justified by religious fatwas and political necessity. It reached its bloodiest zenith under Mehmed III and ultimately faded into confinement under Mehmed I. But the echoes of those dark days linger, a reminder that when family ties clash with statecraft, even the loftiest ideals can be stained with blood. What do you think? Was Ottoman fratricide a ruthless necessity or a moral abyss? Share your thoughts below, like if you learned something new, and subscribe for more deep dives into the wild side of history. According to the 17th century traveler Evliya Çelebi, who spent years wandering the Ottoman realms, he once stumbled upon a secret midnight gathering of Janissaries in Topkapi Palace. He described them as silent shadows in emerald turbans, carrying bowed cords rather than swords, whispering prayers over their condemned prince before execution. Çelebi wrote that the condemned brother looked more relieved than terrified, suggesting the state-sanctioned death was both expected and oddly merciful, a ritual that spared countless civilians from the horrors of civil war. This vivid eyewitness account reminds us that for all its brutality, fratricide was as much about preserving public order as it was about eliminating rivals. Not all Ottoman scholars backed prince slaying without reservation. Grand Mufti Ebu Suud Effendi's famous fatwa argued that unleashing fratricide birthed a legal paradox, sanctioning what scripture elsewhere forbade. A minority of jurists, citing the Prophet's admonitions against murder, called Mehmed II's decree a temporary wartime measure rather than a divine endorsement. Underground pamphlets warning of blood-drenched sin circulated in the bazaar, reflecting a simmering unease. By the early 1600s, this moral friction spilled into public sermons, forcing Sultan Ahmed I to concede that locking princes away was a more godly compromise than extinguishing their lives outright. When Ahmed I abolished fratricide, he replaced it with the kafes, gilded cages where rival princes lived out their days in gilded ennui, Locked behind latticed windows, some spent decades in lonely confinement. One such prince, Shehzade Murad, penned haunting poems to the moonlight that filtered through his grill, verses of longing and regret that survived in palace archives. Though spared a violent death, these royal prisoners suffered a different agony, a lifetime of isolation that stole their purpose and, in many cases, their minds. The kafes reminds us that mercy has many faces, and even imprisonment can be a form of execution. Oddly enough, Ottoman miniatures sometimes conceal subtle critiques of fratricide. In one rare 16th century painting, two princes are shown flanking the Sultan, their heads bowed, while a faint trickle of gold lacquer at the edge of the dais hints at spilled blood. Poets of the day, like Fuzuli, wrote ghazals lamenting the river of tears that flowed from palace windows, using veiled metaphors to question whether power built on kinslaying could ever be pure. These artistic undercurrents reveal that even within the heart of empire, souls wrestled with the morality of a policy that placed dynastic stability above divine kinship. Today's debates over executive power and state security often echo the Janissary dilemma. How far can or should a government go to protect itself? When whistleblowers are neutralized or political opponents jailed without trial, modern regimes risk repeating the Ottomans' tragic calculus. The lesson is clear. Any system that sacrifices fundamental humanity for the sake of order courts a Pyrrhic victory. As we reflect on the Janissaries' grim role as both saviors and executioners, we're reminded that true stability arises not from fear, but from checks, balances, and the respect owed even to one's own kin. When a new Ottoman sultan ascended the throne, his brothers often faced a grim fate. Execution ordered by imperial decree and carried out, sometimes even by the Janissaries themselves, to prevent civil war and secure the dynasty. This practice of fratricide was legalized in 1451 by Mehmed II to preserve the state and endured until 1617, when Ahmed I replaced it with the kafes cage system. Janissaries, elite infantry drawn from Devshirme recruits, played a pivotal role both as kingmakers and executioners, enforcing these brutal succession rules under the banner of Nizam-i-Alam, world order. In this video, we've uncovered the legal, political, and cultural rationales for fratricide, revealed the Janissaries' motivations, recounted the bloodiest case under Mehmed III's 1595 accession, and explored how this policy of mercy saved the empire from repeated dynastic civil wars until it became too monstrous to endure. If you found this exploration as shocking as we did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss our deep dives into history's most startling secrets.